Hi, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Unanswered Questions. I've always thought that there was a point when Prince Harry became aware of Meghan Markle's agenda, and I think he made a conscious decision to use that as a way to escape royal life. But more darkly, I think he used it as a way to get back at his family, to use her as a weapon against his family. And I think all those years of jealousy and resentment that had built up, here he found a perfect way, finally, to get back at them all. Now, I can't prove that definitively, but I was very interested to read in Tom Bower's book some revelations, just a few that pointed to that decision, to that time, to that point where he must have been aware. Also, I find it very interesting that with the Oprah Winfrey interview, most of the criticism about porky pies and untruths are to do with Meghan. But I think, courtesy of Tom Bower's revelations, that I've identified a moment when Prince Harry was clearly, in my opinion, not telling the truth and not letting on what he knew. Now, Tom Bower did a paperback release of Revenge, and in the updated version of it, he pointedly mentions Dusseldorf, September 2023, which of course was the Invictus Games. He observes that the German government treated Harry and Meghan's visit for that Invictus Games like a royal visit. There were police outliers, metal barriers, and a red carpet and a very eager reception. In his understated way, I feel he really was sounding the alarm. He also mentions Manchester for the Young World Conference just the day before. And as Hilary Rose of the Times pointed out, what a difference a prince makes. There was Meghan, who 8 years earlier in the Dublin Young World Conference was an absolute nobody in a crummy unpaid slot that no one cared about. And here she was in Manchester, the star, the main speaker of the whole event. Indeed, what a difference a prince makes. And this brings me to another little aside that I will give you more evidence of later. But I've always wondered about Meghan's backstory. Why were so many prominent people in Hollywood willing to help her before she even became a person of prominence? It just doesn't make any sense. But let's go back to facts we can hold on to with Tom Bower's Revenge and also his account of Meghan's Vanity Fair interview, which was done prior to the official engagement announcement. She also got the cover for that, which was astounding because she really wasn't big enough to get a cover of Vanity Fair. But of course, everyone knew that she was going to get engaged to Harry. Now, that interview should have raised enough red flags to make Harry hit pause, in my opinion. Indeed, Bower points out that his family did make it very clear to him, courtiers did make it very clear to him, that Meghan seemed to spell trouble for the royal family. And everybody was urging him, not just William, even Charles Spencer and Diana's sisters were urging him to hit pause, think about this very carefully, and take his time. So back to the interview. Sunshine Saxon insisted that the focus be on Meghan's philanthropy and activism. There was only one problem. Vanity Fair's meticulous researchers couldn't find any valid philanthropy, and they couldn't find any real activism. All they found was self-created publicity, self-created PR. There was absolutely nothing they could verify in those areas. Now, the Procter & Gamble story originally was in the rough draft, but it was omitted because of Vanity Fair's fact checkers. They discerned it was possibly false. They were being very diplomatic. Now, there was no proof at all that this incident ever occurred, and Bower states that her father, Thomas Markle, knew Procter & Gamble and Hillary Clinton had completely ignored her letters. So in other words, a total fabrication that she dined out on for many years, as you know. And you know the most chilling thing? Even after Vanity Fair refused to put it in the final article and told her why, she still dined out on it. Now, don't you find that chilling? I really find that chilling. Another point of correction was the date she met Harry, and Vanity Fair did print a correction, helped her with that little smoke screen. She wanted to change the date that they met from May to mid-July because, for obvious reasons, she was still living with Corey Vitiello until mid-July. Isn't it extraordinary that after their departure from the UK, Vanity Fair would actually become one of the most fawning outlets for Harry and Meghan? You have to ask why. They knew the depth of her deception. They knew she wasn't who she seemed to be. They knew better than anyone. And yet, for 5 years, even getting on to 6 years post-exit from the UK, they were a major part of her PR smokescreen. They were a major part of putting out all these false fawning stories about Meghan Markle. I find that chilling too. Now, I've got an interesting stat for you. At the time of the Vanity Fair article, Suits only had an audience share of 1.5 million. And interestingly, her heightened status as official girlfriend of Prince Harry didn't move that ratings needle one little bit, not one iota. So Suits was already dying on the vine. Meghan was about to be written out of that series, and she was hoping to lock it down with Has so she would have a new high-profile gig to go on with. Now, I want to fast forward to the beginning of their official exit from the UK on that freedom flight, kicking off with Harry and Meghan decamping to Canada, of course, for that final Christmas when they were still official working members of the royal family, but the press were onto it. One of the biggest giveaways was the fact that they took Guy with them. Now, Tom Bauer tells us that during this time, Meghan was in constant communication with Andrew Mayer, her business manager. I've got a quote for you. The most pressing matters continued to be Netflix and Spotify negotiations. Let that sink in. The most pressing matters continued to be Netflix and Spotify negotiations. Why is that important? Because it was during their time in Canada, that Christmas in Canada, which was in December 2019, prior to their exit from the UK, prior to the Freedom Flight, and years before their Oprah Winfrey interview. And that is very telling, and it gives me a very revealing timeline about when Harry would have realised exactly what was going on and be a part of it. Which brings us to the title. How much did Prince Harry know? Was he really out of the loop on all these plans? Every time they wanted to have a business phone call or make some negotiations with Netflix and Spotify and Oprah Winfrey, did they send him off on a little walk with Guy so he wouldn't hear? Is that what happened? Was it all really hidden from him? Did he really have no idea? And the reason why I say that is he sat down with Oprah Winfrey in 2021 and he said this, and this is a direct quote. It's a rather awkward quote because it seems a bit word salady and a little bit awkward, but it is what he said. But also the Netflix and the Spotify, they're all that was never part of the plan. Very awkward, very disjointed, very embarrassed. So that makes me have a definitive feeling that at that point in Canada, Harry knew exactly what was going on. And yet here he is sitting down, looking Oprah Winfrey in the eye, looking the world in the eye, and telling, I think, a massive porky pie. He even claimed later in the interview, he revisited it, and he emphasized that the Netflix and Spotify deals were not part of the plan. He said they were suggested by someone in the first quarter of 2020 when his family cut him off financially. Now, I think this is really major because it seems pretty obvious that it was always part of the plan, particularly from the point of Canada, at least. And so isn't it interesting that there they are, they have this clear goal, they have these clear plans, they're putting everything in place, and yet they're contriving a story against the royal family in order to excuse their departure. Now, there was a real tell in the interview as well, because he very quickly and very awkwardly changed the subject back to his mum. Now, there was no reason to change the subject back to his mum, because Oprah had already covered his mother, had already talked about his mother, had asked him, and I'm paraphrasing, what do you think your mother would make of all this? And Harry said she'd be disappointed and angry the way they'd been treated, blah, 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 blah. So there was no need to revisit his mother. Oprah didn't ask him about his mother again. But soon after that very awkward, I think, in my opinion, porky pie, he immediately, awkwardly brought up his mother again. And I always find that a tell with Harry. Whenever he's being held to account, whenever he feels under pressure, whenever he feels pushed to tell the truth, he always brings up his mum as a diversion. He did it all through Spare. I pointed it out in my reviews of Spare. He did it in every awkward moment in Spare where it would reflect badly on him. He always brought up his mum. Now a direct question from Oprah, which was rare. So this is direct quote. So what do you say to the people who say you came here just to make these multi-million-dollar deals and that you are just money-grabbing royals? Harry, first off, that was never the intention. Are you sure about that, Has? Meghan, we genuinely hadn't thought about that before. Sure. Well, what were all the phone calls to Andrew Mayer then, Meghan, back in Canada in 2019? Now, there is also evidence that all these plans were seriously being acted upon as far back as the Royal Tour of Australia. I kid you not. Immediately after the Royal Tour, a company that was associated with Meghan's discontinued blog, Frim Fram, had re-registered in Delaware with Andrew Mayer, Meghan's business manager, listed as the agent, and that was within weeks after the Australian Royal Tour. So as far back then, plans were afoot. Now, Sussex Royal also applied for trademarks on a range of products, including bandanas, sportswear, pens, and emotional support services. Cue better up. Meghan was being assured by her LA advisors that the Sussex brand could be as big as the Obamas. They could exploit their royal brand in films, books, finance, and the digital world until the Queen took the rug out from under them and stopped them using Sussex Royal. And thank goodness, she did. Now, do you think that Harry knew as far back as straight after the Australian tour that there was the re-registration of Frim Fram in Delaware? Or do you think he was out of the loop still at that point? Now, to finish up with, I want to allude to what I made an aside to earlier about Andrew Mayer. Why was he interested in Meghan early on in her career? He was a serious, significant player. He managed the financial affairs of several Hollywood stars and still does. Not Meghan level, real stars. Now, post-engagement to Harry, I can understand Andrew Mayer, someone like that, being very interested in Meghan. I can understand everyone being interested in Meghan at that point. His company, Freemark Financial, is recognised for its expertise in entertainment industry finance. But curiously, their business relationship kicked off in 2011, way before she met Harry. And why? She'd just been signed to Suits, but it was nothing. It was a nothing, barely existent. No one knew it. Cable drama. And a hint to the timing of their business relationship kicking off at that time was the incorporation of Frim Fram, which was the company that launched the TIG in 2014. And Andrew Mayer was listed as the agent. And I know that because I've cited all that paperwork myself. So in 2011, Suits was just beginning to make mild ripples as a cable drama at that point. It wasn't a household name. It wasn't a cultural phenomenon. It was only starting to gain a tiny little bit of traction. It was not a premium cable drama. It didn't even become something even mildly cultish popular until about 2014, 2015. And even then, their audience share was extremely small. So why did Andrew Mayer bother taking on this insignificant little actress in a B-grade cable show who had very little money? Now, I've made that point about Sunshine Sacks, about Ken Sunshine. Again, much respected in the industry. Why did they take on this little nobody? Why? And when you Google that, they say, well, that's actually unfair because Meghan was someone of substance with her signing to Suits, a hit cable drama. It's a hit cable drama now on Netflix. It wasn't back then. And finally, it is clearly evident from the evidence that Bauer produced in his original book and also in his updated version, and also various articles written by other people that have not been disputed, that Meghan had a very strategic and businesslike approach to her relationship with Harry, one that would ensure her financial independence and professional network. And I think at some point, Harry was fully on board. How much did he know? And more importantly, when did he know it? Thank you very much. I hope you will join me for another unanswered question very soon. I'll see you then. Bye.